We were the first team to go in and be on the ground consistently in southern Afghanistan after 9/11. Our mission was to go in, conduct unconventional warfare, which is to build a force of viable fighters and to essentially oust the Taliban and kill or capture al-Qaeda. That was our mission. When the events of 9/11 were unfolding, we were actually in Kazakhstan training some of their infantry folks. And it was more or less a year-long set of deployments, you know, a month here, a month there, throughout a year. We were actually eating dinner when we saw the events unfold on BBC News. And one of the things we'd heard just 3 days prior to that was the intelligence assets for the Kazakhs that we were working with. You know, they had mentioned that al-Qaeda is getting ready to do something big. And really, that was the first time I had heard of al-Qaeda. To conduct unconventional warfare, you're starting with, you know, typically tribal folks, bringing them together, getting them to orient around a cause to oust the rogue government, if you will. But that usually takes months or even years sometimes to build that up, because you gather them, you train them, you pay them, you equip them. But the second night we were there, we were getting what's called a lethal drop, and that's where it's weapons and equipment, ammunition for the host nation. But that second night, the Taliban was already sort of aware that the Americans were in the neighborhood and started to kind of probe where we were at in Warjan. We were there from, again, about the second weekend of November until December 5th, when we were hit by a bomb during combat operations. And our team, I think basically everyone on the team was either killed or medevaced that day. December 5th. The third day there, you know, the Taliban had come in out of Kandahar, which was a stronghold at the time for the Taliban, and hung some folks within Tarankau, which was kind of a capital of the Oruzgan province. And so we were kind of immediately switched to gather everybody we can, all weapons and equipment, you know, and go over there to help save the town, because they were over there killing civilians. Basically to say, if you rise up against the Taliban and support the Americans, this is what's going to happen to you. We went in and got there late that night, and people knew we were coming, and they had launched about a 100-vehicle convoy out of Kandahar to come deal with us. And you know, it was an all-day battle where, you know, several Taliban vehicles, etc., were killed and destroyed. And then things were calm for a few days, but then, you know, as things happened, Mazar Sharif had fallen, so the Taliban essentially started to filter back towards Kandahar. And we were just north of Kandahar, so we had to seize Kandahar. We would drive, you know, every day a little bit further south and build the force. There's a bridge coming out of the north of Kandahar, which you call key terrain in military jargon. But the morning of December 5th is when, again, we were engaging Taliban, and we were bombing targets, you know, and we had more forces come in that day, American forces, and kind of turn that close air support over to them as we started to move to seize the bridge again, you know, actually boots on the ground stuff. And they brought in new equipment. The equipment malfunctioned. They sent the coordinates up to a B-52, which plugged the coordinates into a JDAM, a 2,000-pound bomb, and they dropped it on our position where we were staging to move out on another movement to contact. Two of my teammates were killed instantly. One of the guys from our unit, an intel guy who had just gotten there at 4 in the morning, you know, suffered severe wounds and eventually died on the medevac. There's about 24 to 26 casualties. Many of them died. Afghan fighters, you know, sometime during that day. We got some evacuated, but I suffered, you know, face and head trauma, a sucking chest wound, which basically blew my chest open from about here to, actually my arm is where the scar stops, down around my elbow. Compound fracture and my left humerus. I lost my right arm below the elbow, which is my dominant arm, and then just shrapnel, you know, throughout the rest of my body. Because again, at that time too, we weren't wearing helmets, we weren't wearing body armor. We had just come out of our Afghan garb because we were kind of, for lack of better terms, undercover. We were growing beards, and it was just, really a couple of days before that bombing incident happened that we decided, you know what, we're Americans, we're going to wear uniforms proudly. So I think my initial reaction is, it figures that's exactly what one could anticipate that's been over there would happen. And one of the things that was talked about was, in the 80s, and how Americans equipped them and then just left. It's been 20 years, but the case officers, would sit there and say, Hamid, I can tell you, I can promise you this time it's not going to happen. We're going to be here for the long haul. We are going to be here to see this thing through to the end. And 20 years in that region of the world with their culture and the fighting they've been doing, for hundreds of years, it's a slight pause. So they simply just waited us out. There was a process of sort of these going into villages and sort of providing security and stability in villages, and that was really kind of a good strategy that was working, but it took a lot of troops, it took a lot of money, it took a lot of time, and that strategy was changed at some point in the war. I mean, having been there and having talked those long hours of talks with Karzai and the history, and it was just a matter of time.
You think so?
I think so.